What is up there everyone, it's the guy from the Gamer Tag here, and welcome to Battlefield 4 Mastery, the series where I try and master as many of the weapons in Battlefield 4 as possible, and you guys can suggest what weapons I go for next. Now, the point of this series is it's based on your suggestions, so if you want me to master a weapon sooner, I can go and do that. However, I don't have Battlefield 4 Premium, so it'll only be from the standard weapons. But anyway, today we are going to be reviewing the M4 Carbine. Now, this is a burst-fire carbine, which has quite good damage. However, in the recent patch, which if you didn't know reduced most weapons maximum and minimum damages by 1, did seem to nerf this gun quite a lot in close range. I found that it's a lot harder to kill people in close quarters, but it does have a very good fire rate, which means it is still competitive if you can get headshots, because that was one thing I did find, that once it got nerfed, if I could get a headshot in close range, that would almost guarantee I won the gunfight. But you do need a very good trigger finger with this weapon, because it requires you to be able to press it without oversampling, because it is quite easy to oversample it in this game. Now, oversampling is where you've pressed the trigger too fast and then the gun won't shoot, so you've got to try and time it well, but if you can time it perfectly, it does have an extremely high fire rate. Now, at 10 kills you unlock the Reflex RDS. Now, this is a one-time sight. I find it's quite good, it fits the aesthetic of the gun, but personally I prefer a Cobra sight. It just gives me a bit of a better field of view, but the Reflex sight is definitely very usable. You also get a muzzle brake early on, which I found is really useful since this gun has quite a lot of vertical recoil. And then what the grip you really want to be using on this is an angled foregrip. I find that is probably the most beneficial grip, because what it does is it reduces your first shot recoil, and considering you're firing bursts, which is almost like shooting once every time, it will massively reduce your recoil and make it a lot easier to line up shots, especially at long range, which I think is where this gun excels. Now, as I've said, since the patch it is a lot harder to kill people in close quarters. The gun isn't quite as melty as it used to be, because I remember before the patch, if you could just spam it and absolutely destroy people in close quarters, but it's not quite as viable. So maybe if you're a bit of a less experienced player, this weapon is very good at medium and slightly longer ranges because of its damage. Now, I found that actually, even though it does have good damage over range, because being a burst weapon is extremely difficult to track targets. So what you're really going to want to do ideally at long range is take a burst, then reline up your shot, and then take another burst, and sort of have to gradually get the shots on target, because it is a very accurate weapon. So if you can line up the shots well, you will get good long range kills. You've just got to be able to track your targets, which is sometimes the hardest part of it. Now, in close range it is literally just spray and pray. You could use a laser sight, it may help you a little bit. I personally found that I have no real preference in close quarters. I will hip fire if they're in my face, and if they're slightly further away, then I'll usually aim down sights to make sure that my shots are hitting. Because if you're going hip fire only, you are running the risk that your shots aren't going to hit, and you could lose out in gunfights that way. But then if you aim down sights, you've got less movement, so if they start strafing or hip firing you, then you could easily be at a disadvantage. So it's how you decide to play each situation will depend on how effective you are in close quarters. Now, to get the most effective use of the weapon, you of course need to be very accurate with it, seeing as it is a burst weapon, so you need to make sure all your shots are hitting. And I found it really, if you want to aim for the chest area, because then the recoil will kick up and you may get a headshot as well. That is probably the best place in the body to aim for the entire kill range, because at close quarters it might kick up to a headshot, at longer ranges it will probably do the same, and it just gives you the best chance of getting the most shots down range and on target as possible. So in terms of playstyle, like I've said, you can actually play this gun very well defensively, because you can sit back, like on most of these clips I'll be playing rush, and you'll see that in defensive play it is very useful to keep the enemies away from the MCOMs, because you can defend the buildings quite effectively and they won't even get near it, because you're able to gun them down very well at long range. Now, at close range you can also just spray them. It's really down to whether you're accurate. If you feel that you are very accurate, then you will be able to use this weapon aggressively, but if you're not sure, maybe you're a bit inconsistent, you have good days and bad days a bit like me, then that's when you might want to stick to medium and longer ranges, because then you'll get the most effective use of the weapon and you'll be able to get a lot more kills and be a lot more helpful for your team, because that is something that is an issue in Battlefield, is people that don't quite know how to be effective in their team. Now, in terms of loadouts I would recommend, I personally go for a 1x optic, so I personally choose the Cobra sight just because I feel it gives me a good field of view, but also the reticle is really easy to follow and track your targets and actually aim for them and be very specific about your shots. Now, in terms of foregrips, like I said, I put an angled foregrip on this weapon just to reduce the first shot recoil and give you the most consistent recoil all the time and allow you to time shots much better for longer ranges. Now, I also equip a laser sight, which isn't really a necessity. You don't have to use it. You could probably run with no secondary attachment, because it laser sight, the main thing you have to be careful of is turning it off at longer ranges so enemies can't spot you from it. But in general, it can be useful in close quarters. I just use it because I don't like having an empty attachment slot. A bit of OCD just there. And then for barrel attachments, I'd either go with a muzzle brake or a flash hider. Suppressors are okay, but I just personally found it seemed to reduce the muzzle velocity too much, and I wasn't able to line up shots nearly as easily. So I stick with a muzzle brake because that reduces your recoil, or you can go with a flash hider so you don't actually have any muzzle flash when you're shooting. But anyway guys, I do hope you've enjoyed. Like I said, suggest weapons you want to see me master down below and I will see if I can do them. Sniper rifles are going to be a bit difficult because I don't use them often enough and I'm not an amazing sniper. But anyway guys, I do hope you've enjoyed. This has been the Guy with No Game Attack, and I will see you on another video.